Welcome to Management 280 Organizational Behavior, offered by Harper College, utilizing Blackboard Course Management System and McGraw-Hill Connect integrated software. This week is going to be an extension of what we did last week. Last week you had decision making and organizational conflict. Both of them are important in how you communicate with the customer and within the organization. This week we're going to be doing just an extension for that. We'll be talking to Chapter 12, which is digital communication, and we'll be talking on Chapter 13, which is, politics, power, and influence. Okay, so let's first start on this week. Just an overview about Chapter 12. Well, Chapter 12 is communicating in a digital age. If you look at communication, how I have to communicate now, we're doing this online, we're utilizing Skype, we're using internet access, we're using a bunch of social medias, blogs, and everything else, but we still have to communicate face to face. Most of our communication is going to be done through emails. So if you look at the forums and everything else, an extension of the emails only at a professional level. I want to start when you're responding within the forums, to start utilizing some of the concepts that you're reading and some of the terms. As you're already writing up the forums, those should be some of the information that you'll be implementing within your research paper that's due in a couple of weeks. Okay, so what do we have on Chapter 12? Communicating in a digital age. First of all, it's just communication, a general communication. Some of you might already have speech or anything else. Is you have the sender, the message, and what do you call it, the receiver or the encoder and the decoder. So the same communication process as a face-to-face, which is very important. Also, transfers over to the telephone, which is another rich means, because I could look at nonverbal cues, maybe not the face-to-face, but different tones and pitches. Now, when I'm going into writing in the forums or sending emails, I got to be a little more careful. I can't use bold letters because it means I'm shouting. I have to be more aware of what I'm writing, because I have to just assume, anticipate what the decoder or the receiver is going to look at the message. And noise is a little different. It could be static in the line. It could be the words I use. It could be some of the symbols I put in there that could create noise or misunderstanding with our communication, especially now that we're doing more digital, either with social media or other avenues. So, okay, so they're going to talk about the exchanging information between the sender and receiver. Now, you're going to look at barriers. I want you to look at the barriers that could come up, and the barriers could be the language barrier. It could be a different discipline barriers. It could be because I'm using all kind of icons and my receiver doesn't understand them. It could just be because of my accent, or it could be utilizing the words I'm using may be a little bit too complicated for the individual to understand, or he or she may not understand the terms or the concept. And then you have the physical barriers. How close I am to the person, how far I am to the person, and then you have semantic barriers. And if you look at semantic barriers, if you look at the English language, English is a second language for me. Polish is my first language. So if I look at English, there's a lot of words that mean different things, semantics. So words, if the reader doesn't understand the meaning or intent of the word in the content that you've placed it, it's kind of hard for him. He may interpret it, or she may interpret it a little differently. When I'm talking face to face, if I use a word that may be controversial, I could tell real quickly by his facial expression. Same when I'm talking to a person on the phone. If I say something that may not, the individual, the receiver may not understand his tone, or he could question me right away. When I'm writing an email or doing it a forum, I have to be a little more conscious of the words, and I have to understand who the message is going to and kind of anticipate how he or she will receive the message. The next thing is communication competency. And that basically, in business, if you're looking, I could be the best leader and everything else. If I can't communicate verbally and in a written document, means my communication is ineffective, okay? And I have to be able to change my communication, the terms and conditions, the tones, my mannerism, basically to the audience who I'm coming, trying to communicate so they can understand it. I'm thinking how is the receiver going to receive this? Okay, so there's exercises on business etiquette, and in the forms, I'm always telling you, use your first names, because in business it's very professional. You don't say, if I'm doing a tweet, a Twitter, or a social media where I'm just doing one line things, I don't have to use the individual's first message because it's a different kind of medium. When I'm doing a form or business communication, dear George or dear Dr. George, all that gives us that professionalism, and it puts the person at ease, and figuring that you're showing that person respect indirectly. So there's a thing on business etiquette. Okay, now there's different styles of communication. Sometimes it's okay to be aggressive. Other times it's okay to be assertive. Other times it's good to be non-assertive. It depends on the situation how my communication style changes. Not only the individual and the surroundings and who I'm communicating and what kind of message I'm communicating depends on the style I'm going to utilize. The other part you have to really, really be careful of is the nonverbal communication. When I communicate words are only about 10–15% of the message going to the individual. He or she is looking at my face, they're looking at my mannerism, they're looking at the tone of my voice, they're looking at which words I emphasize, which words I don't emphasize, they're looking if I'm looking down, they're looking if I'm sweating, they're looking if I'm looking mean at them, they're looking if I got my hands crossed, they're looking if I'm looking at them. All those nonverbal types of communication, they basically send a message. If you look at when we went into global chapters down the road or different cultures, a lot of cultures are very nonverbal communicators. In the U.S., we're always written communication. I think that's the only communication. But everywhere outside the U.S., it's more of a nonverbal. People, you have to be careful of your nonverbal. Sometimes our nonverbal messages are stronger than the word itself. So if I look at you and I say, "Hey, you did a real good job," and I give you that smirk. Yeah, that really meant a lot. I could say that the message, the wording was right, but the nonverbal really diffused it or made it meaningless. Because if I say, "Hey, you really did a real good job. I'm really proud of you," man, that's the way you go. Go. You see how just a nonverbal expression and the pitch and the tone, that all made that communication solid and rememberable to the individual. Okay, now the other part of the communication that you'll be doing, and it's part of the form, you're going to be doing two forms, is active listening. Remember, God gave us two ears, one mouth, and the tongue, okay? So it means He wants us to listen more than we're speaking. Active listening in this digital world. I got the BlackBerry. Look at my room. I'm talking to you now. I've got two other computers on here. I've got my iPad and my iPhone. All that is distracting me. So when you're looking at active communication, active listening, how you have to do is you have to actually stop, put everything away. Usually what I would do in the office or policy is I would sit and talk to the individual off to the side where I'm not distracted by my own thing. I'm looking at the individual and I have to look and pay attention. Remember, different cultures, if I look at the Japanese, if they're nodding their head, that doesn't mean they're agreeing with you. They're basically nodding the head, nonverbal, saying that they heard the message. It's not an agreement like when the U.S. are going, yeah, I understand, that's good. Where Japanese or an Asian or different cultures may go, nodding like this, and you think, oh, I got to say all that. They're agreeing with me. No, they're just saying, I'm listening. I didn't say I agreed. I'm just nodding. That's how they send the nonverbal. Okay, so make sure you're active listening. And then what happens when active listening? After a person stops, paraphrase. Don't do word for word. Oh, so you're talking about you want a promotion, or you're talking about you're upset with the policy that the company is implementing. See, so you're actively listening, you're paraphrasing just to make sure that you understood the message, and the sender says, hey, the receiver, the decoder, he or she understands the message, how they're responding back to me. One thing you have to look about active listening. When you're in an interview or anything else, I have people, I ask them a question, and they come out of someplace and say, where did this come? It had nothing to do with the question. I know they weren't listening. And if I'm hiring this individual for a sales position or for a managerial position where he or she has to listen to the issue that's being presented, if you don't know what the issue is, if you're passively or halfway listening, you'll respond to it inappropriately, or you'll give or respond to it that may later on end up biting you because you agreed uh, to a situation, or you agreed to something that you didn't really listen to or really pay attention to. Okay, so and if you look at active listening, how you look at it. Are you looking for comprehension, the discernment? Always evaluate. Men and women listen a little bit different. Men, we listen real short, quickly, so get to the point. Women, you want to have a little more feeling, look at more emotion, but it doesn't make a difference. You still have to be able to. How does a man listen? How does a man take information? How does a woman take information? How does a woman listen? And how does a woman retain information? Now, when you're looking at the last part of this chapter, it's going to be communication in a computerized age, information age. If you look at this, our age, uh, uh, where we're at right now, we have the internet. We have the intranet. That's internet only within the company or within an organization that people have access to. You have the email. That's the main communication thing. You had video conferencing. This would be kind of like a video conferencing, only it's a one-way conference. Usually video conferencing be like a Skype, where I'm talking to you and the other person's on the other side, and they have a camera. It's like and the camera could follow along the person, so I know who's talking. I don't have to be in there, but I could see the nonverbal. I could see the pitches. I could see all that information. So that's kind of a real powerful. I like the video or the Skype when somebody plays it back. It's almost like constantly videoing yourself, and you go, "Hey man, this really makes a difference." And you have group support systems. You have teleworking. So when you look at all this, active listening, the table. This is chapter 12. Very important, because if I respond inappropriately, it'll work off of what we've learned on conflict resolutions, and we're looking about making decisions. Cause I'm making decisions because I didn't hear the message right, and I'm responding and making a decision of something that wasn't really asked for. Okay, so that takes care of chapter 12 on communication. The next chapter is kind of an interesting chapter, chapter 13. It's on politics, influence and political, power and politics. Whether you like it or not, if you look at the Democrats and the Republicans, different political things, there's some kind of conflict always there. Communication messages are different. I say something, somebody counter acts that. No different than in a corporation. There is politics. There's no way around it. Even in your own family, you have some kind of political positioning or game playing, or I want to look better than my peers or counterpart. If politics is there, you cannot eliminate it. You should be aware of it. Company policies should be in place to kind of minimize any kind of negative politics, but just be aware of the politics there. So what are you going to look at? You're going to look at, when you look at politics and you look at power, there's 9 generic influence tactics. You're going to say personal appeal. Look, if I want to get something done, I'm real nice to my boss, or if I want something from my wife or from my husband, I'm basically acting a little bit nicer. So I'm looking, buttering up, for lack of better words. I have rational persuasion. I have inspirational appeal. Sometimes when you're looking at a charitable organization, they're going for that emotional, inspirational appeal. You have exchange of ideas. You have coalition tactics. You have pressure. You're either going to do this, I'm going to fire you, or you do this because it's in the best behavior. You got legitimate tactics. So those are all basically influence tactics that you use to gain power, to maintain power, and is part of the political arena. The other thing is 3 influence outcomes. After you have this power, what do you expect from them? I would expect commitment from my employees, or I want compliance. If I'm using pressure, you will do this, or I'll fire you. I know they're going to do more. They're just going to do just enough to get me off their back, so I'm looking more for compliance. And then I'm going to have some resistance. If I have a resistance, how do I negotiate? How do I talk to the person to overcome the resistance? You have social power. Social power is my status, my ability to communicate. If I'm an easygoing individual, that's the social power. It's almost as influential as legitimate power or peer pressure. Okay, you have 5 basic powers that that the book talked about. The first one, if you look as a manager, because I had that position that we're going to learn on leadership coming up in the next chapter, is reward power. If I reward somebody, that basically gives me some power. If I punish someone or coercive, that gives me power. Legitimate power because I have the title. Right now, I'm the instructor, so I have a legitimate power here. I have expert power because I also know. Now, see, those three powers come with the title. The other one, expert power, if I have, is, I may not have the first three, but I'm an expert in my field, so that is a power. Or I have the other reverent power. They respect me. That's a power. So if I look at the first three and add the other two, if I have all five powers, that makes me a very good communicator, and it makes me, when we go to the next chapter, a good leader. Evolution of power, you started off with autocratic type of a power. It's more pressure and a reward and coercive power, and legitimate power. And now you're looking more at influence sharing. So the powers change a little bit. We have empowerment, we have teams, you have power sharing, you have power distribution for different levels that have more powers. And now, if you look at it, the other chapter talks about participative management. To new leaders, as we go into the other chapters, they're looking at leaders who are able to share their power. I don't need to hold the power. I find out if I give the power away, I have more power because people aren't there under compliance. They're doing it because they respect me, they have reverence for me, and it works out all around. Okay, you're going to look at organizational politics. Why do organizational politics come in? You're going to talk about the five sources of uncertainty. You're going to talk about the three levels of political action. Okay, so look at that. Frequently use political tactics. Now, some of them are good. The politics, some of them are bad. Building a network of useful contacts, like I'm trying to use this forums. How do you build that network? You got to give to get something back. But when you give, don't always expect to get something back. I'm just giving because it's a good thing to do. And a lot of times, if I'm giving with those strings, people will respond and be receptive to me more than you would expect. Using key players to support initiative. If I want something done, I have to understand the informal leaders and the formal leaders. Making friends with power brokers, who are people in position. Self-promotion. One of the political things is I'm just being nice to people because I want to get promote myself. So my power is for my own self-promotion. If you look what happened with Hurricane Katrina, the FEMA manager, I'm not mentioning names, but he was basically looking, well, how do I look? Is this going to make me go? He's not worried about the people that were hurt. He was just worried about his own self-image, how he looked, because he's going to look like gentle and everything else. So it's a self-promotion power. Praising others is a power. Attacking others or blaming people. It's a political game. I didn't do well, so I'm going to make everyone else look lower or throw dirt or mud at them. So all of a sudden it elevates me instead of me trying to be better than them and use them as a benchmark and try to beat them at their game and being fair and honest. When I'd be in the sales, I would do everything that's fair and honest. When I won the rewards, it wasn't any kind of politicals. I did it on my own merit. I did it on, some of it was merit, some of it was just a blessing in disguise. Things came in, fell into place for me. All those things was just hard work. So all those combinations would give me the success I needed. I had no problems going up there. And people who would look at this said, he's got the reward because he got the reward honestly, fairly, and that also created respect and reverence from individuals. Okay, impression management. As a manager, again, you have to look at favorable impression you want to do. You could leave some bad impression. If you're always yelling, always walking around grumpy, the nonverbal as a manager, sure, you'll get things done, but you're going to have that impression, well, he's not the team player type of manager, but if we're going to fire someone, he's the individual we want. Okay, and how to keep politics reasonable boundaries. These are policies that the companies should in place. Remember, this is organizational behavior, and we're looking at the managerial things, not only to make sure we have the right individuals that understand the politics, but as a company, how do we structure our organization? How do we have policies and procedures to minimize the politics? I want some politics because that's your networking and everything else. There's no way I could get around it. It's just part of everyday life. Like I said, your family, there's some political pull. If I got the car and my wife wants the car and my son or daughter wants the car, so there's a little politics, a little power. Who's got more power, okay? And basically you're looking at, you'll have one assessment in the political thing. It's not going to be in a forum, but it's going to be part of your McGraw-Hill Connect. Okay, so that takes care of the chapters. Now let's talk about the forums. What kind of form? You're going to have two general forms. You're going to have one form, but you're going to do two assessments. The first assessment is going to be on communication style and the stress. All of us are good communicators. Because we know it have to be, everything's working well, so I'm in a good mood, nothing's going wrong, I'm a good communicator. What happens when all of a sudden, for lack of better words, things hit the fan, and now I'm under stress? My boss is yelling at me, the customers yelling at me, the employees are yelling at me. What kind of communication do I flip out into that autocratic type, or am I still relax, take a couple of breaths, and control the situation and communicate on a level and not to throw more fuel into the fire? Okay, so that's so you're going to find out your own communication style under stress, and then you can do another assessment, your active listening, how good of a listener you are. Now look, when you do these surveys, I'm not looking at any of the points. The forms are just for you to talk about, so be honest with yourself. Use this as an assessment, because you're going to move in with the organization, and you want to make sure that you're coming across properly and everything else. So where am I weak? If the assessment is just a micro assessment, tells me I'm assertive, or I have this kind of things, or I'm not a good listener, that's something you start developing. That's no issue. I like to talk, so I usually wasn't a good listener. After taking the assessments and other kind of development courses, I know to sit down, look at the individual, take a deep breath, and try to look at the person and take word for word. I would take notes and everything else and look at the individual and say, now I understand. So it takes a while to be an active listener. Easier said than done, okay? So that'll take care of my two assessments, and then you'll go into the forum, and what you basically do, you'll post your your results from assessment 1 and 2. You've already been doing this for me, and you'll need to reply to others within the forum. Remember, I'm looking at 3 individual logins on 3 individual days, responding to 3 different customers each time. First of all, to my post, and then 2 or 3 other students within the forum. Do not wait to the last minute, because if you post your last post at 10 o'clock on Saturday, there's no way anyone else is going to be able to read those posts. It's already turned off. So some students already have all their 3 posts, like Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and they're done with the forums. And they'll just come back at the end and just talk a little bit, and then they'll be able to get some feedback. You're just doing it all at the end. You're not really caring about communicating with anybody. You're just doing, this is an assignment. I just post, hey George, you did this. I don't really care about communication. That's already telling me a lot about your communication style. You just want to get it done and get it over with. That's not how you're going to develop communication and develop a network and develop relationship. Remember, in politics, you have to be political. You have to know how to communicate. You have to be able, the first one, to put your message in, and you have to be able to know how to talk to other people, not all at the end, because people aren't going to listen. At the end, they're tired, they turn it off. Okay, so remember, I'm looking for 3 individual posts, and you'll list your score. You name the main topics you identified. You'll agree or disagree with the assessments. What could you do to improve your listening skills or your communication skills? And what new learning you've learned out of this? I want you always to learn. Don't look at this as assignment. You're going to get your grades and everything else. The forums are basically, and assessments are self-development. So when you get into that managerial position where you could change your organization, you could communicate your ideas. You could have the best ideas. If you can't communicate them, if you don't know how to, you don't know who's in charge, who's the power, and how do I use my politicals, suaveness to go in there and get things done, you're gonna be at the short end, and you'll never move up within the corporation that you want, and your corporation and your team will never be able to move up, because they're going to look at you. How you communicate is how your team members and how your organization is going to communicate to not only other individuals, internal, external customers, but anyone they touch. Okay, so here's the readings. You got the readings, chapter 12 and chapter 13. You have 1 quiz, 20 points, and you're going to do on chapter 12 and 13, the quiz. You have the Connect assignment, 12 and 13, again, worth 20 points. The forum is worth 25 points. You're doing 2 assessments, and you're responding, and I'm looking for some, don't come to me, and a lot of students are saying, I did my 9 posts, Dr. George, and why did I only get a B? Because there's no substance. Hey, George, nice job. You know what? When you look at the others' posts and you see what other individuals post, I don't want 20 pages, but I want some substance, and I want some uses of terminology, and I want some concept. We're already going through. We're already here at chapter 12 and 13. We only got about 3 more chapters in the paper too. By this time, you already been through several forums. You know what's expected. I want to see you improving in the communication, not staying the same. The grade is going up. The goal is going up. You're just going to give me mediocre comments, mediocre posts, you'll get your grade. If I'm looking for the A student or the communicator above and beyond, an excellent communicator, you better provide something that shows me that you could communicate in a written document as this. Okay, so that is this week. We're going to be doing 2 chapters, chapter 13 and chapter 12, and I think we're doing pretty good. So that's it for this week. The form, one form, answer the forms, be active within the forms, try to get the forms done, communicate, look at the forms as a simulation, how it would be in the business world, and use the person's first name, be professional, start using terms and concepts from the reading within the form when you're responding. This gives you credibility and validity. Okay, so we're about it. So, we only have a few more chapters and the paper's due. Hopefully you're doing well on your paper. You should be almost done. Remember, I need 6 or 7 resources. I'm looking at about 25 to 3,000 words, which equates to about 300 words per page. And we're looking at 6 outside sources other than the book. How do we get some of the sources? When you look at the chapters, and if this is a chapter that you selected, you're going to do your research paper on, go in the back of the book and see what sources the publisher or the utilizes, and read a couple books there, or go online, use YouTube. And remember, when you're in the forums, if you find a site or something that's informative, put it in there. I'll post it on the student sites so other students can learn. That's how you build the network. Okay, that's it. So this week, this is Management 280, organizational behavior. Offered by Harper College, utilizing Blackboard course management system, McGraw-Hill Connect. Covering chapter 12 is communication, and chapter 13 is power and political. And I'll see you in the forum. Bye.